The veto session is over and the transition to a Pritzker administration goes on. We'll talk about it next on Capitol View. Welcome to Capitol View, the program where we talk about state issues, sometimes federal issues, and how they just might affect your life. I'm Bernie Schoenburg from the State Journal-Register. Legislators have come and gone. That last election is over. There are some city elections around, but we'll talk about those some other time, probably. With me today to discuss state government in particular, Charlie Wheeler is back. He is director of the Public Affairs Reporting Program at the University of Illinois Springfield, longtime Chicago Sun-Times reporter at the State House before that. Welcome back, Charlie.
Thank you, Bernie. It's always fun to be here.
And Hannah Meisel is here again. She is State House reporter for The Daily Line. Welcome back.
Glad to be here, thanks.
Okay, Charlie, just before we started the show, you were talking a little bit about trends out of an election that really had some changes in the structure of the parties in Illinois, or the political structure of Illinois, with the Democratic wins, and I don't know if they were expected or not, but can you go over a little of how different is it going to be come January when the new legislature is seated and we have a Democratic governor?
Yeah, well, let me, you mentioned I was a reporter for the Sun-Times for a lot of time. Back in my day, the Chicago suburbs elected mostly Republicans. Downstate was a mix of Republicans and Democrats. The city of Chicago was all Democratic. Well, the city of Chicago is still all Democratic. There's one Republican, Michael McAuliffe, who's elected from the city in the House. But the overall makeup of the state's regional partisanship has changed dramatically. I actually counted up the winners, and in the Senate, the Democrats are going to have 40 out of 59, which is, I think, the highest that they've ever had. But of those 40, only 6 of them are going to be from outside the Chicago region, including Andy Bunker, who's in our area. I'm sorry, Andy Manar from Bunker Hill.
Yeah, right.
Oh, man. And on the other hand, in their shrunken numbers, the 19 Republicans will only have 5 who are from the greater Chicago area. The rest of them are going to be from downstate, districts that used to elect Democrats. Same thing true in the House. Michael Maddy is going to have 74 members.
Wow.
11 of them will be from downstate districts.
Mm-hmm.
There will be 44 Republicans, only 14 of them from Chicago. Well, McAuliffe from Chicago, and then from the suburbs, mostly the collar counties. And the rest of the Republicans are going to be downstaters. So the regional partisanship has really shifted dramatically. And basically the northeast corner of Chicago is pretty fairly Democratic after the last legislative election. The rest of the state is pretty solid Republican.
Yeah. Hannah, it's interesting. The governor had a press conference late in the week, and of course he's not as boisterous as he was during the campaign, but he said that basically he feared for the state of Illinois because the people who have caused all these problems are now going to be in charge and have overwhelming numbers. He, of course, fought so hard trying to say Mike Madigan, the Speaker of the House, was bad. We need to take away his membership. We need to have legislative candidates sign pledges that they won't vote for Speaker Madigan, and now Speaker Madigan is going to have the most powerful time. The governor didn't seem like he's changed his tune. Of course, that would be hard to change after he's been saying these things for 5 years. Where does the Republican Party go, do we think?
Oh my Lord, I feel like I've been involved in so many of these conversations over the last 3 weeks, and even before that when people kind of saw the writing on the wall. I mean, there are 2 main lines of thinking. You have people who say, the Republican Party, the experiment to go to the right is just not working. You have to be more moderate to win in Illinois. That's the reality of Illinois. And then there's another camp who says, screw that. We need to become more conservative. We need to not kowtow to the demographics of the state. We need to,
partly embrace Trump.
Yes, partly embrace Trump, which, Governor Rauner struggled with, the last 3 years since Trump came on the scene, and that caused a lot of issues between him and more conservative voters. And so the governor today, he said he had thoughts on this, but he wasn't willing to share quite yet, and kind of left us all scratching our heads as to what that means.
Yeah, well,
Some sort of memoir expose, I don't know. That doesn't really seem like a great use of his time, but
we'll see.
we'll see.
Yeah, Charlie, I mean, just from the long perspective, the pendulum swings, and this was a big pendulum in Illinois towards more Democrats. Will we see the pendulum go back, do you think, to in an enhanced Republican Party at some point? Or are the demographics changing so fast in Illinois that it's not going to happen in a while?
I would say that it's not likely that the Republicans are going to be in control of the General Assembly anytime in the near future. The reason I say that is because, well, first, the demographics are working against them. Basically, people like me, old white guys, are a smaller percentage, and you're not quite there yet, Bernie.
Oh, I'm getting there.
are a smaller percentage of the population. People with Hispanic roots, people African American, particularly the Hispanics, those portions of the state's population are growing, and until the Republican Party can find a way to appeal to those voters, it's going to have a hard time being a majority. And I don't think going hardline with President Trump, going far to the right, is going to work in Illinois. I look back at the governors that I covered who were very successful. None of them were far-right guys. None of them were anti-labor guys. You look at a Jim Thompson or Dick Ogilvy.
Jim Thompson actually got the AFL-CIO endorsement back in the day against Adlai Stevenson, as I recall.
Yeah, and his administration negotiated the first contract with Ask Me, or a Jim Egger or George Ryan. They were all not, what was the right word be? They weren't zealous ideologues that it's got to be my way or the highway and you have to be pure. They were pragmatic. Government exists to help people do things that they can't do individually. Everybody would agree that you can't really fight your own fires. You need a fire department. Everybody would agree with, I don't think I can actually pave like the street in front of my house. I need to do it collectively. And looking at government as evil, as some of these Republicans do, and I think as Rauner has the idea that less government is better, and we ought to get rid of all these human service things, which he tried to do with his action on the budget. I don't think that'll play in Illinois.
He, of course, wouldn't agree with your characterization of what he was trying to do, but clearly the budget impasse hurt a lot of those services.
Yeah, I look at it in a perspective of being able to compare what happened during his time with what happened during the 26 years of Republican governors before him.
Right. The legislature was in session this week, and before Thanksgiving, 3 days each, a 6-day veto session. One of the things that did happen, and there was a little fireworks along the way, was there was a bill, and it was really kicked off by the 14 deaths that occurred from Legionnaire's disease at the Veterans Home in Quincy since 2015, I believe. Under state law that's been in place for a long time, if you have a claim of negligence against the state, you have to go through something called the Court of Claims. There was a limit on the awards that you could get from through that court at $100,000. That's a lot less than damage awards in outside courts. The legislature passed a bill raising that cap to $2 million. The governor used his mandatory veto to say it should come down to $300,000 because if you go to $2 million, a lot more cases than just what happened at Quincy will be open to lawsuit. Trial lawyers will be filing cases a lot. It'll cost the state a lot. We can't afford that. The legislature did end up overriding, but also, Hannah, there was an issue with State Representative Stephanie Kifowit from Aurora, who is I believe, a veteran of the Marine Corps.
Yes.
In the House. Tell us a little about some of the drama that ensued on the way to overriding this veto.
Well, so Republican House member Peter Breen, he was just actually defeated in his election bid by a Democrat. He was saying, the argument against this bill is that, yes, like you said, it will open the state up to many more lawsuits, et cetera. It's the 2 million figure is just too high. It also seemed arbitrary. And then Representative Kifowit stood up and said, You know, she was trying to make the point of, you know, what if this happened to your family? But she chose her words kind of carelessly, and it came out as, I'd like to make you a broth of Legionella and put it into your water supply and see your family suffer and die.
She did say that, yeah.
It was quite a moment. It was just not good. You know, of course, she said that she was making the point in the service of the bill and of the families of the victims who died from Legionnaires. However, you know, it didn't come off good. Jeannie Ives, the ever-present gadfly of the Republican Party, stood up and, you know, she said, you wish death on our
Right.
Republican colleague. This is so inappropriate. Peter Breen, then off mic, he said, you know, he got very, very upset and said, you wish death on my bleeping family.
Yes, he said that off mic apparently.
Yes, and so Kifowit eventually stood up and gave kind of a half apology and said, you know, my words misconstrued. The record will show that I didn't say that.
Or that I said, if you could imagine this
Right,
might happen.
right.
But in fact, she had not said that.
Yes.
So,
So anyway, the next day, I was told to be on the floor pretty early because Republicans were planning on striking it, using some obscure House rules to not just strike it from the record, which is a rare move, but it can be done. But then they also used another House rule to file a petition of dissent and protest, which ironically, into the record, it says exactly what she said, so the exact phrase that they just took from the record, but it contextualizes it instead of having it just be in the official record.
So she ended up doing a real apology. I actually heard
Yes.
Speaker Madigan's spokesman Steve Brown on the radio in Springfield the next morning saying, or within the next couple of days saying, you know, she came to my office, we decided what she said was wrong. It should be a clear apology. They fashioned a clear apology. They put it out. There were some Republicans, the state Republican chairman had put out a statement that she should resign the legislature. That's not going to happen, and that she shouldn't work on Pritzker's transition where she's supposed to help veterans. And I think they are saying, you know, unfortunate words, but we look forward to working with her. Charlie, how out of the usual is this? And you
Well,
know,
it's certainly uncommon. People don't usually be that, what would you say, hostile towards one another. On the other hand, as I said before the show, no punches were thrown.
As
I
that
remember-
happened in your experience
Yeah.
watching legislators get
Yeah,
a little into it?
Yeah, one lawmaker would slug another. So, but yeah, it was really a dumb thing for her to say in the heat of the battle. And Kifowit is a Marine veteran, and so this was something that struck very close to home for her. And she was really fired up and aggravated at Breen for suggesting that, well, we can't do this because we might open the state up to all these big awards and the trial lawyers would get wealthy off it. And her point was, let's think about the veterans. And she used very poor language for which she apologized, as she should have. But I don't think that she actually intended any harm to Breen's family. People, as I say, they say stupid stuff on the floor in debate. It's not subject to any penalty in that you're basically shielded from any legal activity for what happens on the floor of the House, that a member would say. And as Breen pointed out, were you to have called this into my office, you would have been arrested.
Yeah, although I guess some controversy as to if it was a close enough, a real enough threat, or if it was more, you know,
Yeah.
hyperbolic, et cetera. But on we go. So when Governor Rauner then met with the press the last day of the veto session after the legislators were gone, he did say he called that it was a mistake for them to override this veto, among others, because of the cost to the state, and he called it a major giveaway for the trial lawyers. So this is the kind of rhetoric we would have heard from him from the time he was a candidate to now. I mean, trial lawyers tend to be attacked by Republicans. They donate to Democrats, and Democrats tend to like what they do more, you know, to get the damaged party what they deserve, if that's what you think, from the corporations or those who wrong them, in this case the state. But he was pretty
and
strong.
the way it works, you can file a suit against private individuals or corporations, but you can't sue the state because the state is a sovereign. And so we have this court of claims, which is different than the regular civil courts or criminal courts, where someone can file And the state, in essence, says, we will allow you, even though we're sovereign, we will allow you to sue us for this harm that we caused you. But here's the limit on what the judges can award, $100,000, and that was set like 40 years ago. And people were saying, well, this isn't adequate. And so the legislature said, let's make it $2 million. That doesn't mean everybody who files a claim with the Court of Claims is going to get $2 million.
Of course not, right?
It allows the justices in their, what would you say, in their judgment to award up to that amount. But I'd be willing to bet there won't be too many $2 million awards.
Yeah, interesting. Also, during the veto session, people might have heard some news because I believe it was the Senate that overrode a veto that the governor had. There was legislation passed by the Democratic legislature again to raise the age to buy tobacco products to 21 from, I think it's 18. And the governor vetoed that, saying he didn't think it would aid in health that much because people would just cross state lines or buy their cigarettes elsewhere, and it would just hurt Illinois businesses. The Senate overrode. The House, I believe they needed 71 to override. They only got 62 votes. So I don't know if this will return perhaps in the next year, but the governor's veto was sustained, meaning the bill dies, meaning you can still buy tobacco at 18 in Illinois. Hannah, do you think, I don't know if J.B. Pritzker has said where he is on this, but you can imagine with a stronger Democratic legislature, all they need is 60 votes in the new session to pass a bill, and this time they got 62 in the House, although there'll be new members, but obviously the Lung Association was strongly for this bill to try to get more people to quit smoking. So
yeah, I talked to the Lung Association lobbyist yesterday right after the vote, and she said, you know what, we'll just try again. That will be the 5th time that they're going to try. This is the closest that they've gotten so far. I asked her if she felt confident that Pritzker would sign the bill, and she said yes, but I've never heard him talk about it. It's something that if he toes the line on, health issues, he could easily say it's a progressive win. However, it's a tough sell. The tobacco industry is going to lobby hard on it, like it's lobbied hard the rest of the 4 years that this.
And it's probably not just the tobacco industry, but also like those who represent gas stations, convenience stores.
Yes.
They want the sales. They don't want to restrict who can buy.
And it's not like Illinois can give away. Collecting the taxes from these is pretty vital. Illinois and our municipalities that have, the 1 penny sales tax or whatever, they like these kinds of things. It's a necessary evil, you might say.
Right.
One interesting thing, though, that might push it, toward the yes camp or the sign camp is, I've got a lot of friends who are teachers, middle school teachers, and they say, every single day they're finding kids in their schools with these vape pens. And that's something that kind of exploded out of nowhere. And people in my generation, I don't know a ton of people who smoke, millennials, but I know, Gen X before me, and apparently these Gen Z kids, they are smoking, and it's negating a lot of the public health gains that had been made during the previous, stop smoking campaigns.
Yeah, well, that will be a continuing battle. Nobody thought years ago, Charlie, when we started watching things, that they would ban smoking on airplanes and ban smoking in all restaurants and indoor spaces in Illinois. That was a rather radical and took about 20 years in the legislature. Bob Turcich, I think, a firefighter from Chicago who fought it every year. And the Clean Indoor Air Act, and they finally got it done. Yeah. So sometimes there is a sea change. It just takes a while.
When I was in grade school, I had friends who started smoking in 3rd grade. So there you go.
Well, there you go. We should mention, we talked about Mike Madigan earlier. The formal vote for leadership in the General Assembly takes effect in January when the new General Assembly gets seated. I think it's on January 9th. Is it?
January 9th for lawmakers, January 14th for the governor.
For the governor and other executive constitutional officers. But Mike Madigan, the Democratic caucus did meet this last week at the state AFL-CIO building. And the word was that the caucus has decided again to elect Mike Madigan as speaker. I don't think anybody else was serious. Was there? There was one newly elected person, not in the legislature yet, but soon to be. Her name is Ann
Stava Murray from Naperville.
She had said she was going to vote against Mike Madigan and wouldn't be for him. That was one of her campaign pledges, and she stuck by that pledge. I again heard Steve Brown talking about this on a radio show. He is Mike Madigan's spokesman, saying, that's fine, we understand that. She campaigned that way, she did what she said. So Mike Madigan, Speaker, again, Charlie, what does that mean for the state? Given what we've heard from Governor Rauner and others for years, that he's a bad guy, what does this mean for the state? Of course, Mike Madigan has defended himself since the election and since he gained so many seats.
Yeah, and I have a very, again, biased opinion because I have a lot of history to relate it to. And I would say that in the grand scheme of things, Bruce Rauner probably caused more damage to the state than Mike Madigan ever did. And if you look back on Madigan's career, he worked well with Jim Thompson, he worked well with Jim Edgar, he worked well with George Ryan, and he was used to cooperating with Republican governors until along came a Republican governor who started out by saying that he was corrupt and he was a crook. And to me, it's just a matter of common sense. If Hannah and I are going to try and do a deal, it doesn't make it easier if I start calling Hannah a crook, right?
And we know she's not.
No,
So.
I mean, yeah,
I mean.
and neither is Madigan. And so Rauner's whole approach was wrong. And I think Madigan cares about the state, he cares about the city of Chicago. He will protect unions because that's part of his DNA, but he will work to move the state forward.
Okay, now it was not only Rauner has argued, however, that, and even under Jim Thompson, giving state employees more opportunity to collectively bargain and giving some contracts, including 3% increases after you retire and annually, that the pension debt has grown. There were budgets passed where they didn't pay enough into the pension system, which has helped create a crisis. And I realize there were Republican governors during some of that, but people, not only Bruce Rauner, say, the Democrats have created this mess or have had a big part in creating this mess, including Mike Madigan, who's been Speaker for so many years. So is that a problem, and can the Democrats now going to be fully in charge of the governor's office and both houses of the legislature, in addition to every other constitutional office, do things in a way that will be responsible?
Yeah, I think they can. I think that if you look back at it, historically, the state has never set aside enough money in a given year to cover the benefits earned by its employees in that year, the so-called normal cost. There was a warning that came out, I think it was in 1916 or 17, a legislative panel was concerned because we're not adequately funding these pensions. And so it's been an ongoing problem under Democratic governors, Republican governors, Democratic majorities, Republican majorities in the legislature. And in my mind, you can't really cut the benefits. The Supreme Court has said that over and over. The Constitution guarantees that. In addition, this is a contractual relationship, and one side can't unilaterally change a contract. And so, in my mind, probably the smartest thing is to try and restructure the current ramp that requires ever higher contributions each year, kind of like when you refinance your mortgage,
Right.
if you had an adjustable rate mortgage.
And Governor-elect Pritzker has said just that.
Yeah, and so it'll take a big hit. Maybe you enact a temporary tax for a couple of years to do the first boost and then have level payment plan that over time will diminish it.
Of course, any tax will be a tough vote. We'll see how it goes. Hannah, I mentioned as I opened the show that the Pritzker transition goes on. One of the committees, he's got several committees going.
7 now. Yeah.
Okay, one of them is the Educational Success Committee. Co-chairs Andy Menard, state senator from Macomb County, Bunker Hill, that's right. Chris Welch, state representative from up north. Janice Jackson, CEO of the Chicago Public Schools. And interestingly, Kathy Griffin, the new president of the Illinois Education Association. Now, it was really kind of almost startling when Bruce Rauner was a candidate. He said that the president of the IEA at the time was one of the people.
A government union boss.
A government union boss.
Yeah.
These are the people who are hurting us, and yet now Pritzker is working, right in tandem. Even though he also has people like Jim Edgar, former Republican governor, as a co-chair of his whole transition committee, and he's got
former Senator Christine Radonio
on the budget committee.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of a new day. I guess we have to see again if how the legislature works with unions, and if that is a way that, if they come up with solutions that are cost conscious as well.
Yeah, I mean, the unions are, obviously, they're not going away anytime soon in their strength and might and money, but also their numbers. I mean, you can't just, but so they're a reality that the Pritzker administration is going to have to deal with. But you know, despite the huge union money that went into this Democratic blue wave that ultimately brought Pritzker into office, I don't think that necessarily everything's going to be sunshine and roses. We have a lot of ongoing I mean, we have some court cases still open. We have fiscal issues. And, you know, if unions get too bold too quickly and ask Pritzker for too much, I mean, like, that's not going to play well either. I mean, I think that Democrats who think, you know, a new day has dawned in Illinois and everything will be totally fine are fooling themselves, because, I mean, Pritzker and Madigan are not going to be BFFs. I can tell you that right now.
Best friends forever. For those who are, you know, not millennials. Charlie, we're just about out of time, but Barbara Flynn Curry is one of the legislators leaving office. She has been the majority leader under Mike Madigan for a number of years. She's from the south side of Chicago. Very intelligent person, great debater. We don't know who Mike Madigan is going to name into that position as we tape this show, but just a very quick thought about that type of legislator if everybody hates all legislators.
I'm not sure what you're asking.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I'm saying I guess she's not your typical, like, oh, everybody hates legislators. She's a person of substance.
Oh, yeah, and the legislature's always been made up of people that I guess are representative of the entire demographic. Some of them are idiots. Some of them are very, very bright. Some of them are crooked. Some of them are Boy Scouts, you know.
But there are some good ones, and we're going to have to leave
it
at
most of them are good ones. Most of them are here to help their constituents.
Thank you very much. Hannah Meisel, Charlie Wheeler, thank you. Thanks for joining me. I'm Bernie Schoenburg, and we'll see you next time on Capitol View.